I think I'm going to try to explain to you in my I3 Forum at role this morning what the I3 Forum and the industry in general has been trying to do to help the adoption of IPX by the players, both on the mobile side and the carrier side. But just before I start, I'd like to see with the rooms, how many of you have heard about the I3 Forum? Okay, pretty good, pretty good. Okay, almost everybody. Okay, just to test your knowledge, how many members do we have in the I3 Forum? 25?
45.
45? The higher the better? 47? All right, I'll let the answer in 2 minutes. We cover a lot of field and different topics. How many, we're structured with work stream and work groups. Do you have any ideas how many work stream and work group we have? 4? Okay. We actually have 5 work stream and 2 work groups. So I'll describe that a bit later. And last question, before I start on the IPX topic, do you have an idea of how many countries today are served with IPX, with an IPX provider, actively, in service? 20? 40? 50? No? More than that? Anyone? Okay. There's over 75 countries, and I'll give you a picture of what are those countries that we serve. All right, so answer to my first question, we have now 49 members that are part of the I3 Forum. I think with that membership, we estimate that we cover about 80% of the international voice traffic and a lot of the IP traffic as well. All the major players are represented to the I3 Forum table. And as you know, over the last, since most of you know, we've done a lot of reports and work in the last few years. For example, some of the work we've produced at the IPX core document, which was, what does it mean, a core document? Is that we've worked to help the carrier define what would be the service, the technical framework, the service framework, the operating framework. So all of this to facilitate the adoption by the industry of the IPX. So as you know, the GSMA was the initiator of the IPX story, but I think that the I3 Forum work enabled the IPX to become a reality in the market. We also work on a lot of aspects in the I3 Forum. You have the ops work stream that spend a lot of time on testing procedure and so on. We have all the technical spec, the service spec, we touch signaling. Routing and addressing is a big topic for us right now. IMS, what's the implementation on IMS and how are we going to do the implementation of IMS? Codec. There's a lot of issue we heard in the presentation this morning about HD voice, which is one of the key drivers for IPX. How do you manage? There's tons may be too much, but there's a lot of HD codec out there. How do you manage those in the network? How do you manage interconnect over for HD voice? Security was a big component of IP in general, because IP is a more open framework, but IPX specifically is a key requirement that we handle security properly. So all of those aspects and more. We have also a fraud work stream. We have a service technical. We have a communication work stream. And we have 2 work groups, one looking at HD voice and the other one looking at OTT and their interwork with the carrier community. So a lot of the activities going on, and now more specifically around IPX. So very similar slide to what Steve showed a few minutes ago, what it is and what it's not. So of course, as an industry, we also look at what is IPX. So one of the things we realize, I think most of you realize as well, is that there's no common definition of IPX. It basically means whatever the service provider who offers IPX wants it to mean, right? So there's some common base that we've seen out there, but there was not a uniform definition. So we spent a bit of time on the I3 Forum to try to come up with a short one-pager definition of what would be the basic rule to be named an IPX. We're not pretending that the industry will adapt this and every service provider will say, this is my definition of IPX, but we just wanted to help the service provider community, the mobile operator, when they look at an IPX provider, to have some reference as a base. What is a minimum standard to be an IPX provider? And we've looked also at the implementation and the characteristic that needs to be there when you implement both technically and commercially. What are the supported services? What are the features that you need? What type of SLA can you support? What sort of pricing model do we see out there? So not trying to impose anything, but not more trying to reflect what we saw in the market and what we thought was the right approach. And of course, the GSMA IPX, the specifications are very important for the IPX, but they still represent a flavor of IPX. If you look at what's offered out there, it's one of the flavor. It's not the unique flavor of IPX, right? There's a lot of different type of application. So what was the i3 from approach to IPX? So we used IPX in a generic term and to describe IP-based interconnection. So first thing, and we've seen that already, it's based on a private IP domain. It's not public internet. So I don't know if there's service provider in the room, but if you ever have an offer that says you can do it over public internet, I think this is not IPX. It's multi-service capable. I think this is a key component. We've seen from Steve's presentation that some of the positioning are single services. It's fine to start with, but really one of the key driver and benefits of IPX from my perspective is the capability to handle multi-services on a single port or on a single layer. And if we're not capable to do this, it reduces the value of having IPX in the market. It's designed to support high-quality IP-based services. So it's focused on high-quality services. There is break-in, breakouts, no problem. You can have all the services through an IPX port, right? We have some customer, for example, I'm removing my i3 from hat, putting my Tata communication hat on for a second, that will connect to us over IPX and say, I don't want to maintain 3 interconnect with you, one for IPX, one for voice, one for this, and that's a single interconnect. And then I'd like to break out from the cloud for my other services. Yeah, that's fine. That's possible also. But that's the driver between the implementation of IPX was the high quality. It allows a cascading business model. What it means that there should be money for everyone in the food chain, right? Basically, you have the originator that pays the service provider, that pays the next service provider, or a carrier actually, the IPX provider, and the service provider. So it supports a number of different business models. There's not a single business model, but it's most of the business model is based on a cascading business model. It guarantees service assurance across the whole IPX domain. So end-to-end being service provider to the IPX provider entry, and to at the other end, IPX provider to service provider entry. It guaranteed services. We can support SLA, and it's secure. It's based on MPLS, on some sort of private IP network. IPX service are offered by IPX provider, of course, to a service provider. So just to make it clear, it's not a service provider offering IPX to another service provider. So really, we're talking about the core of the network and not the edge. And IPX provider can, and of course, do interconnect among themselves to guarantee worldwide coverage. So this year, for example, one of the progression we've seen in the last 12 months compared to what we had before is we have seen a number of peering agreement being announced and being implemented in the network. So this part of the coverage is now increasing. So here's the picture we had. We did a survey of our members, and not all our members replied, but we had a good number of, I think it's 15 or something like that did reply to the survey. And this is the coverage that we had that was in, I think it's June or April or something like that. It was earlier this year, but we did the survey. And this was the coverage we had at that time of the service of the countries which are today receiving service from an IPX provider. Of course, what happened is that a lot of those countries are served by a single or by two, but not necessarily peering. Peering, as I said, is really just happening now. But really, we can see the adoption is coming in terms of coverage. Now, the other question we need to ask, and it's difficult to put on the map, is how many service providers are buying the service, right? Because you look at the country, you see if there's one interconnect with an IPX provider in that country, it's green. But does it mean the industry has adopted IPX? Does it mean there's a lot of traffic on it? What sort of services? Is it single services? Is it multi-services? There's still a lot of questions we need to answer. But the good news is it's getting there in terms of coverage. So peering is getting there. Coverage is getting there. We have a number of strong IPX providers that are taking part. And what do we need to do as an industry to stimulate now? What's the next phase of stimulation of the IPX? Well, the GSMA and the I3 Forum have discussed an idea to promote the need to migrate to an IPN environment, an IPX environment. So in the ITW this year, we announced and launched an IPX, voice over IPX pilot program. Which was started, as I said earlier this year, to really gain practical experience in voice over IPX. What do we mean by commercial? It means we're not there to test, right? We've done those testing in the past. We know it works, right? There's maybe challenges in implementing, but there's a lot of documentation that has been done, a lot of experience. Most of the IPX providers in this room are no longer facing a major technical challenge, maybe facing other types of internal challenge to implement an MPLS trunk with voice on it and signaling coming from two different groups and everything, but that's not a technical challenge. That's more the way we're structured and the way we approach this business, right? Because for most of us, it's tough. It's the first time we have an integrated business to really offer in the market. And most of us are organized in product section, and we need to get together to do this. So this should give us experience in terms of how do we deploy IPX, a voice over IPX, expand the number of countries. We have 75 plus. Of course, we'd like to have a global reach in terms of customer, and use the experience from the pilots and the commercial negotiation to share the information with the rest of the community. The members, the people you've seen there are more from a service provider perspective, so not an IPX provider, but a service provider perspective, who have agreed to participate in the pilots. This slide was done earlier this year. I think we have more now, but these were the initial customer, if you want, of IPX that have agreed to participate in the pilots. I think the overall IPX provider community has, of course, agreed to participate in the pilots, and it's slowly picking up. So the mobile industry, of course, recognized the importance of the cooperation with the carrier. That's why we have a very tight relationship and discussion with the various GSMA bodies. We provide a lot of experience to the community in general. So what we really need to do is work more and more together to make this IPX and this IP communication world really happening. And we'll continue in the future to work very closely with the GSMA, with other organizations to make the IP world in general and IPX world specifically a reality. That was a nice picture taken at the ITW when we launched. Those are the I3 Forum members that were part of the initial pilots. As I said in the other slide, you had the names of the customer. Here are the IPX provider that have initially launched, and since that, I think we had a couple more that joined the pilot. For those of you who are interested, you can talk to us, I3 Forum or GSMA. The framework of the pilots and defining where we're going to track and all this is going to be defined this fall. So it's not there. The framework is just being defined right now. But basically what we want to do with this is having people saying, okay, I'm doing this voice, I have this voice over IPX commercial agreement between a service provider, an IPX provider, sometimes two IPX provider, and another service provider. These are the types of contract I've been using. These are the challenge I faced during my implementation stage. These are the services I'm running over it. So not disclaiming anything confidential in terms of terms and condition or price or whatever, but just more the framework that you're using to do this. And hopefully this will help the industry realize that it's not that complex to implement an IPX framework. In closing, I just wanted to let you know that we have a close collaboration with some organization for other workshop that we're doing. There was a workshop in Istanbul in September that I think that was pretty successful. We have our next workshop in Asia, in Bangkok, at the end of October. And we'll have another one in Dubai for the Middle East, where basically the i3 Forum contributes to the debates on the adoption and migration to IP and, of course, migration to IPX. That's it. Thank you.